been working together for almost 10 decades.
10 decades?
What differences have you noticed in each other? That's going to spoil my shot now.
I turn 133 tomorrow. It's my birthday.
Now, how have you, apart from sharing this, and Johnny, have you seen your relationship change over the past 2 decades?
10 decades.
There's a particular kind of person who walks into a room and immediately makes everyone else feel like they've been doing conversation wrong their entire lives. Not because they're trying harder, not because they've rehearsed better lines, but because they've somehow opted out of the unspoken agreement that says, stay predictable, stay safe, keep it moving. Johnny Depp never signed that agreement. And the proof isn't in his films, though there are plenty of moments there too. The proof is in what happens when you sit him across from someone equally famous, equally prepared, equally confident in their ability to steer a conversation, and watch that confidence slowly dissolve into something between confusion and helpless laughter. Because here's what most people don't realize about Johnny Depp: the humor isn't an act. There's no green room preparation, no index card with quips, no moment where you can catch him recalibrating. The timing is too strange, too specific, too genuinely odd to be manufactured. When he says something that makes an entire studio audience go silent before erupting, it's because even he didn't quite know that's where the sentence was going until it arrived there. Today we're going deep into the moments when other celebrities, people who are themselves masters of the public-facing persona, genuinely could not keep it together when faced with the unfiltered, unpredictable, casually chaotic force of nature that is Johnny Depp in conversation. These aren't moments of planned comedy. These are moments of collision. And they're some of the most entertaining television, print, and public interaction ever captured on camera. Let's start at the beginning, or rather, at a moment that perfectly encapsulates everything that follows. To understand why Johnny Depp breaks celebrities, you first have to understand what makes a celebrity unbreakable in the first place. The modern celebrity interview is, at its core, a performance of authenticity. Both parties know it's a performance. The audience knows it's a performance. And yet the best interviewers and the best subjects have perfected the art of making that performance feel real. Late-night hosts are trained conversationalists. Talk show veterans have logged thousands of hours steering conversations, managing silence, redirecting awkwardness, and making guests feel comfortable enough to produce content worth broadcasting. Journalists who sit across from A-list talent have usually done weeks of research, prepared angles, anticipated deflections, and built-in contingency questions for when things go sideways. Johnny Depp makes all of that preparation feel like bringing a map to a city that doesn't exist on any map. The thing that catches people off guard isn't that he's rude, or difficult, or evasive, though some of his more famously strange interviews have led people to those conclusions over the years. It's that he's sincere. When he says something bizarre, he means it. When he pivots to an entirely unrelated topic mid-sentence, it's not a deflection, it's where his brain actually went. And that sincerity is disarming in a way that practiced wit simply cannot be, because no one has a rehearsed response for genuine. Comedians, who spend their professional lives crafting the unexpected, will often laugh at Depp's answers with a particular quality of laugh that means, I didn't see that coming and I'm a little annoyed that I didn't see that coming. Actors, who understand better than anyone how to inhabit a character under pressure, will glance sideways at him like they're waiting for the reveal of what the actual answer was going to be. And journalists, who have genuinely heard everything, will sit there with their pen hovering over their notepad just slightly longer than they should, because they're not entirely sure whether they just got the answer to their question or a completely different question they hadn't thought to ask. That's the specific chaos Depp operates in. And once you understand the mechanism, every example becomes its own small masterpiece. If you were going to design a scenario where Johnny Depp would meet his comedic match, you'd probably design something like, put him in a room with Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais has made an entire second career out of being the person celebrities cannot handle. His Golden Globes hosting stints became legendary precisely because he said what everyone in the room was thinking and then smiled politely while the cameras caught their targets attempting to laugh through the discomfort. He is, professionally and personally, someone who doesn't flinch. And yet, when Depp and Gervais ended up in the same promotional space, a meeting that had the energy of two weather systems being introduced to each other, something interesting happened. Gervais deployed his standard weaponry. The mild-mannered voice, the dangerous smile, the joke dressed up as an observation. He referenced his Golden Globes commentary, The kind of institutional memory that usually puts celebrities on the defensive, reminding them of a moment when they were the subject rather than the agent of comedy. Depp's response was not defensive. He had, apparently, gone away after the Golden Globes and prepared material. Not angry material. Not retaliatory material. Comedy material. Jokes, actual written jokes, about Ricky Gervais, composed with a few friends, delivered with the straight face of a man reading a grocery list. What makes the exchange so remarkable isn't that Depp fired back. Plenty of celebrities have attempted to fire back at Gervais and landed with varying degrees of success. What makes it remarkable is the quality of the jokes and the complete absence of any indication that Depp found them funny himself. He delivered them like a man completing a task. Like he'd been told there was a form to fill in and this was the form. Gervais, and this is the important part, laughed. Not the polite laugh of someone processing an attack. The genuine, slightly startled laugh of someone who has been genuinely caught off guard. For a moment, the professional provocateur was the one being provoked, and the expression on his face had the quality of, "I did not script this." There's a lesson in that exchange that goes beyond entertainment. Two people who are both, in their own ways, professionally immune to the discomfort of the room, and one of them still blinked first. Depp didn't try to out-Gervais. He just wandered into the exchange in his own register, delivered his material with complete calm, and let the atmosphere shift around him. That's not a comedic technique. That's a personality trait. And it's why comedians, who understand technique deeply, often look slightly unsettled after a Depp interaction, even when they're laughing. There are moments in the cultural calendar that arrive unannounced and leave a phrase permanently embedded in the collective memory. The mega pint exchange, which emerged from the very serious and very public legal proceedings in 2022, became one of the most unexpected comedic gifts of recent years, not because it was designed to be funny, but because of Depp's unshakable, absolute calm in delivering it. When asked, in what was intended to be a pointed line of questioning, whether he had poured himself a large glass of wine, the exchange that followed was something that comedy writers would have been proud to construct deliberately. The term megapint was introduced almost casually, treated as if it were a unit of measurement everyone already understood, and Depp's response, essentially a gentle technical clarification, landed with the precision of a perfectly placed punchline. The Internet, recognizing what had occurred, did what the Internet does. Within hours, the phrase had become merchandise, memes, and a cultural shorthand. Not because of the context, which was serious, but because of the delivery. The complete refusal to be rattled. The mild, almost academic quality of explaining what a large glass of wine was, as if the lawyer asking had simply never encountered the concept. What this moment revealed, more than any scripted comedy appearance could, was the core quality that makes Depp's humor land in ways that professionals often can't replicate. He doesn't perform calm. He is calm. And when someone is genuinely unbothered in a situation designed to make them bothered, the contrast becomes inherently, unavoidably funny. The celebrities and public figures who attempted to discuss the exchange afterward, late-night hosts who built segments around it, comedians who referenced it in sets, were all, in various ways, trying to explain why it was funny. Which is always slightly less funny than the original thing. Because the original thing wasn't a joke. It was just Johnny Depp answering a question in the way Johnny Depp answers questions, which is to say, completely, specifically, and without any apparent awareness that the answer might be unusual. Some comedic partnerships work because both parties are performing comedy. Some partnerships work because neither party is performing comedy and yet the result is comedic anyway. Helena Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp occupy a category of their own. Two people who have worked together across multiple films, who share a particular aesthetic frequency that might be described as gloriously unbothered by consensus reality, and who, when placed in a joint interview setting, tend to produce conversations that journalists describe afterward using phrases like, "I'm not entirely sure what just happened." The specific joy of a Depp-Carter joint interview is that they don't finish each other's sentences so much as they decorate each other's sentences. One of them will begin a statement about, say, how many films they've worked on together, and by the time both of them are done with it, the number has become absurdist, the timeline has stretched to encompass multiple historical epochs, and the interviewer has quietly put down their list of prepared questions. When they casually extended their collaborative history to 10 decades, and then further extended it to predate the invention of cinema entirely, the joke worked on multiple levels. On the surface, it was simply a playful exaggeration. But underneath it was something more interesting. Two people who are genuinely comfortable with each other finding the edge of a normal answer and then stepping cheerfully off it. What catches journalists off guard in these situations is the confidence of the absurdity. Neither Depp nor Carter delivers this kind of material with a, "Can you believe what we're saying? Look at the camera." There's no wink. There's no invitation for the audience to confirm that yes, this is funny. The statement is simply made, with the full weight of conviction, and then the conversation continues as if time-traveling friendships were a perfectly ordinary thing to mention. Interviewers who are very good at their jobs will sometimes manage to keep up, find the thread, and ask a follow-up that works within the established absurdist logic. Interviewers who are slightly less prepared will nod in a way that suggests they're hoping the next question on their list will restore some sense of order. The clip almost always ends with the interviewer looking like they've just stepped off a ride they didn't entirely understand, but are quietly grateful to have experienced. There's a particular category of interview question designed to be unanswerable in an interesting way. "What is your favorite swear word?" is a perfect example. It's a question with almost no capacity for surprise, because the only real answers are a common swear word, an unusual swear word, or a deliberate refusal to answer. Any experienced interviewer knows roughly what they're getting. Depp managed to make that question surprising. By the time his answer arrived, calm, British, completely committed, the room had already shifted. The surprise wasn't the word. The surprise was the specificity. The sense that this was, genuinely, his answer. Not a performance of an eccentric answer. An actual, considered preference delivered without irony. The best celebrity interviewers, people like Graham Norton, who has conducted thousands of high-profile conversations and has a particular gift for creating an atmosphere where genuine moments can happen, have noted, implicitly or explicitly, that the difference between a good interview and a great interview is when the guest forgets to be a guest and just becomes a person. Norton's red sofa has seen a lot of carefully managed celebrity personas. The moments that become clips, that get shared and reshared, are almost always the moments when the management slips. With Depp, the management never begins. There's no opening phase of careful positioning, no gradual warming up to a more relaxed register. He arrives, apparently, exactly where other people take 20 minutes to reach, that state of being genuinely present in a conversation rather than performing participation in a conversation. This creates a fascinating dynamic where the interviewer often ends up looking more rehearsed than the subject. Norton himself has been caught mid-laugh in ways that suggest Depp's answers genuinely caught him mid-preparation for what he assumed the answer would be. And then there's the question that seems simple: who's the best kisser among your co-stars? A question designed to produce either a diplomatic non-answer or a diplomatic compliment to whoever the film's press tour currently requires mentioning. Depp's answer, delivered without hesitation, without the slight pause that would indicate the answer is calculated, named Javier Bardem. The room, which had been prepared for something else, took a moment to catch up. And in that moment, that half-second of collective recalibration, you can see exactly what it is that Depp does that other people can't manufacture. He makes you feel the gap between what you expected and what arrived. Sometimes the evidence for Johnny Depp's specific social charisma comes not from him but from those around him. There's a particularly charming account of a celebrity, someone who is themselves accomplished, publicly confident, and entirely capable of navigating the social landscape of fame, who did not want to meet Johnny Depp. Not out of dislike. Out of the specific paralysis that affects people who admire someone in a way they find professionally embarrassing. The described scene is nearly cinematic, hiding behind record store racks, being essentially marched toward the encounter by a more confident companion, arriving with the rehearsed opening of a person who has been practicing this introduction in the shower for longer than they'd care to admit. And then the conversation went sideways immediately, in the most Johnny Depp way possible. A perfectly reasonable opening line about a film was misheard, or perhaps genuinely misunderstood, as a reference to the musician Alice Cooper instead. And the correction had to be made. And then the correction made things slightly worse. And somewhere in the middle of all this, the planned moment of elegant connection became a gentle, mutual tangle of misunderstanding. The celebrity telling the story described it with a specific combination of mortification and delight that suggests Depp handled it without any apparent awareness that anything had gone wrong. Which is, of course, the thing that makes it most charming. There was no moment of graciousness where he made her feel comfortable about the misunderstanding. There was simply the conversation, going sideways, self-correcting, going sideways again, treated as a perfectly normal progression of events. What this account reveals is something important. Depp's effect on people isn't constructed. You don't arrive at that kind of encounter because someone has carefully deployed a social technique. You arrive there because the person you're talking to is simply, genuinely, doing what they actually do, which in Depp's case is following the conversation wherever it leads with the apparent assumption that wherever it leads is equally interesting as where it was meant to go. There is a specific kind of celebrity exchange that reveals character more clearly than any scripted performance can. Ask an actor about their film on a press tour, and you will receive a response that the actor has given approximately 40 times that week. The language will be positive, the anecdotes will be practiced, the enthusiasm will be calibrated to suggest genuine feeling while requiring the minimum of genuine feeling to sustain. It's not dishonesty, exactly. It's professional maintenance. Depp's press tours have, historically, not worked this way. The revelation that he had not watched his own film, not on the occasion of being asked about it, not at some later point when curiosity might naturally have led him there, but simply, had not watched it, and did not seem to feel any particular urgency about the situation, is the kind of answer that makes publicists quietly step out of the room to make a phone call. And yet, the honesty of it lands differently than you might expect. Because it's not evasion. He's not refusing to discuss the film. He's answering the question of whether he's seen it with a candor so complete that it circles around and becomes, somehow, more engaging than a prepared answer would have been. The explanation, that his job ends when production ends, that what happens to the film afterward is genuinely not his area of professional concern, is actually a coherent artistic philosophy. But the way it arrives, in the middle of a press tour specifically designed to generate enthusiasm for the product, with a cheerfulness that suggests he finds the question itself mildly puzzling, creates a comedy of context. The interviewer, who has prepared questions about the film, must now improvise. The segment that was supposed to be about a specific movie becomes about something broader and stranger. And the audience, which came to hear about the film, gets something they didn't know they wanted, an honest account of how one particular actor thinks about his own work. This, incidentally, is why the same clips keep circulating years after the press tours that produced them. The prepared answers age. The honest answers don't. It's worth pausing here to note something that gets lost in the compilation of funny moments. Johnny Depp is not, by training or profession, a comedian. This is obvious and also, when you think about it, remarkable. Actual comedians, people who have spent years studying timing, who understand the architecture of a joke at a structural level, who have failed publicly enough times to understand exactly what failure looks and feels like from a stage, will often discuss what makes someone naturally funny with a combination of admiration and mild professional resentment. The things that make comedy work, surprise, misdirection, the management of expectation, the release of tension through an unexpected landing, are craft elements that take years to master. The counterintuitive insight of most working comedians is that none of it should look like craft. The craft exists to create the impression that no craft is present. Depp creates that impression without the craft. Or rather, he seems to create it without the craft. What's actually happening, when you watch the moments closely, is something more interesting. His comedic instincts are genuinely idiosyncratic enough that no one has a prepared counter-response. Standard comedic structures have standard defenses. Audiences know when a joke is being told. They can feel the architecture, even if they're not consciously aware of it, and they prepare themselves for the release. Depp's humor doesn't give them that preparation time. The joke, if that's even the right word, arrives before the scaffolding that would typically signal its approach. And by the time you've registered what happened, you're already laughing, which means you've missed the mechanism entirely, which means you can't quite explain why it worked, which means you want to watch it again. Comedians find this irritating in the most affectionate possible way. There's an asymmetry in the Depp interview dynamic that's worth making explicit. When most celebrities say something unexpected in an interview, the room, whether that's a studio audience, a panel, or a journalist, recalibrates toward the celebrity. The conversation bends to accommodate the unexpected. Everyone leans in, tries to understand, tries to help the moment find its footing. When Depp says something unexpected, the room recalibrates too, but in the other direction. Instead of bending toward him, it bends around him. Like water moving around a rock. He doesn't shift, everything else does. This means that in group settings, in panel interviews, in the specific dynamic of a talk show sofa with multiple guests, something interesting happens. The other celebrities present tend to become a slightly heightened version of themselves. They lean into their own registers. They find, sometimes to their own surprise, that they're being funnier, stranger, more honest than they might usually be, because the conversational atmosphere Depp creates doesn't punish that. It rewards it. Helena Bonham Carter, already a famously unwilling participant in conventional celebrity behavior, becomes even more herself beside him. Interviewers who have sharp comedic instincts will find themselves deploying those instincts more freely. Even celebrities who are primarily known for serious work will occasionally land a line they didn't know they had in them. This is the rarest quality in a conversational partner. Not that they make you laugh, but that they make you funnier. They lift the ceiling of what's available in the exchange. People who study social dynamics, researchers interested in how humor functions in group communication, have noted that the most socially intelligent participants in group conversations are often those who generate what's sometimes called comedic permission, the implicit signal that the room is safe for unexpected responses. Depp, apparently without any conscious intent to do so, generates this permission constantly. Impressions are a specific genre of celebrity party trick. They require a gift for mimicry, an understanding of which subjects are ripe for impression, and a willingness to commit, because a half-committed impression is somehow worse than no impression at all. The story of how Depp came to deliver a Donald Trump impression for a Funny or Die production is itself a comedy about authenticity. He didn't arrive with the impression polished. He didn't, by his own account, do impressions at parties. The suggestion that he'd obviously been doing it privately and simply needed an invitation is exactly the assumption that doesn't hold up, because the impression, when it appeared, was specific enough to suggest genuine character study. When asked about feedback from the subject of the impression, whether Trump had reached out, Depp's response demonstrated the specific timing that makes his humor so resistant to analysis. The pause before the answer. The apparent genuine consideration of the question. And then the answer itself, delivered in the tone of mild regret. He stopped calling. The implication that there was a pre-existing relationship conducted by phone, that this impression had disrupted it, that Depp was genuinely sorry about the disruption, was delivered with a straight face that made the studio audience's laughter lag by almost a full second. Because the brain had to process whether this was an answer or a joke before it could decide to laugh. That half-second gap is where Depp lives, comedically. In the space between statement and interpretation. The moment when the room hasn't yet agreed on what it just heard, there's a version of this conversation that treats all of this as entertainment and stops there. These are funny moments. Funny clips. Funny exchanges. The internet has categorized them as such and will continue to resurface them when algorithms determine that a particular news cycle requires either distraction or a reminder that charisma exists. But there's something worth sitting with beyond the entertainment. Authenticity, genuine, unmanaged, unperformed authenticity, is rarer in public life than we usually acknowledge. The machinery of celebrity has become so sophisticated, the tools for managing public image so precise, that most of what we see when we look at famous people is a very good approximation of a person rather than the actual person. Which means that the moments when someone is simply, completely, genuinely themselves, in front of cameras, in front of audiences, in front of journalists with agendas and interviewers with schedules, are the moments that become memorable. Not because they're unusual, but because they feel unusual. They feel like the windows in a long wall of carefully painted surfaces. Johnny Depp has spent decades providing those windows. Sometimes in ways that have complicated his public life considerably. Sometimes in ways that have charmed everyone in the room into helpless laughter. Sometimes, as in the mega-pint moment, in ways that managed to be both simultaneously. What the celebrities who couldn't handle his humor were actually struggling with was something simpler than humor. They were meeting someone who had, apparently, decided that the performance of self was less interesting than the actual self, and was willing to show up with the actual self regardless of context, regardless of expectation, regardless of whether the actual self was going to give the room what the room wanted. And the room, consistently, over decades, across thousands of cameras and journalists and fellow celebrities and carefully controlled media settings, has responded to that with laughter. Because it's funny. And also because it's a relief. And also because, somewhere underneath all of it, audiences recognize what they're looking at when they look at someone who isn't performing. They're looking at a person. That's rarer than it sounds. And funnier than you'd expect. And nobody, apparently, not Ricky Gervais, not veteran talk show hosts, not prepared journalists, not fellow actors trained in the precise management of their own personas, has ever quite figured out what to do with it.